Hello, my name is Chris. I'm a consultant with the North American group in Wonderware, and understand there's been some questions about how possibly you could utilize our Historian Client Trend tool in custom applications, that is, things built in Visual Studio. So we thought we'd demonstrate that to you here real quickly, and we're going to do that. Again, this is not a deep dive, it's just kind of like a primer on how to accomplish this. So I'm going to open up Visual Studio 2010, create a new project. I'm just going to do a C# Windows Form application, also works with VB.NET. I'll create one called Trend Example. First thing we have to do is we have to get this thing into our toolbox. So what I'm going to do, first thing I like to do, I like to set up the properties for my app so it utilizes, I forgot to make my default the full .NET framework. So I want to do that and make it the full framework. And then I'm able to come in and create my toolbox items. So I like to create my own groups, so I'm going to add a tab here. I'm going to call it Orchestra Components, and then I'm going to choose my items. Now, where we have to go to get the trend tool itself is pretty simple. It's in Program Files x86, Common Files, Orchestra, and I went into Adobe, so that didn't help me much. There we go. And then it's called AA Hist Client Trend Control. AA Hist Client Trend Control.dll. And that should take care of that. Now what we can do is drag and drop this out onto the form. It takes just about 5 or 10 seconds for it to do its initial render the very first time. After that it's much quicker. And then just like any other control you'd use in Visual Studio, you drag and drop it where you want. It has a name, so you can come in here, like I'll call this AA Trend. It has lots of settings about what font sizes are going to be used. Specifically though, under our miscellaneous category, we have all kinds of things that you can do to this thing. Whether or not you allow multiple tags, allowing context menus to pop out, whether people are allowed to edit the grids, putting this thing into a read-only mode, how often it should auto-refresh, just all kinds of things about this. You can see there's tons of these. So if I look down here, like lockdown mode is one of my favorite. If I wonder what does lockdown mode mean? Well, we didn't happen to enter a description for it to enunciate inside Visual Studio. But the good news is all of these methods, properties, events, and capabilities are documented within our system. So if I just open up the Historian Client Users Guide, and that was called Lockdown, you can search for that. Now this one just talks about it in the visual interface. My next one actually talks about it. Let's get rid of this window here. As its property applies to the API and the control itself. So you can see its syntax, it's a discrete, what's it mean, and really it's the remarks that tell you everything that applies when you set that. And all of these methods, properties, and events are documented this way. So really it's just a matter of getting to know them. So let me give you one or two really quick examples. We'll start off with a button of how to add tags to this. Now, you may notice even in design time, you have here the SAM 2012 R201. That's the name of my server. Our historian tool, client tool here, memorizes or keeps persistent the name of the service you've connected to. So you don't have to load that each time. You probably would want to put some logic in to make sure there's a server and it's connected to before you interact with the system. It's completely possible. You go through the servers listing to do that. I'm going to show you a simplified version here of how you just add tags. And we'll do multiple tags at the same time just to prove a point. So I'm going to double click on the button to set up its action on click. I called that AA Trend, and there's an add any tag method. So what that requires is the name of the server as a string, again mine is SAM 2012 R201, and then the name of the tag, sys times sec. And you can do this multiple times as a matter of fact, so we don't have to just do it once. And if I'm really smart, I'll just add systime min, systime hour, and those three will work. Now one thing that I've learned through experience, and again it's just looking at the properties, taking the time to get to know the controls better, maybe even going through a training class, an official training class, teaches you some helpful things. For instance, I know that there's a method that when I'm adding multiple trends, there's this property that says add multiple tags. Well, if I don't set this to true, as each tag gets added, the trend gets updated. Its scales get refreshed, its tag references get rebuilt, and it gets re-rendered. However, setting this to true first says just hold off doing any of those things until it gets set to false. So what I could do is say add multiple tags equals false. Now it will be much more efficient. It'll add all the tags before it tries to re-render. Alright, so one last thing I want to talk about before we go into runtime here and take a look at this. because our client controls were created on an earlier version of the .NET framework that was a little bit more forgiving than the newer versions are in type references, there is one current SR or service request to change the product that's in place. So if I hit Control Alt E or go to the menus to get to the exception binding, I do need to come into my Manage Debugging Assistant and find my pinvoke method for imbalance and turn that off. Why? Because we're not worried about any time there's a signature mismatch. As long as the system can run and it's not going to cause an actual exception, we want to keep going. So I'm going to go into runtime here. I'm just hitting F5, which puts it into a debug runtime mode. So we can take a look at this. Sure enough, we're in here. It's running. Notice we're already connected without any work on our behalf programmatically. All I have done is drop it in. And if I click on Add Tags, you can see they automatically get added in. We can change the time reference and look at the different values, and this all works. So what are some other ones we can use? Well, how do I clear tags? Very easy again. Kind of just real quick and dirty way of doing this. I'm just kind of come in here, clear one, or create a name for it. Double click on it. And there's a method called clear tags. So now after I've added these tags, it's very simple to get rid of them. Let's see how fast that is. And of course, all this can be done programmatically without user interface activities. Maybe one last one I want to do is show you how you can interact with the system. I guess I should give you a runtime view of this first. When I click on this, you can see that I get a context menu that pops up. I may not want users to have access to that, or I might want to turn off certain toolbars, but it depends on their logins, or it depends on a lot of different factors. As long as you can measure those factors, you can programmatically control what they have access to. So let's say you want to get rid of the ability for people to use context menus. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to call this thing Show Context Menu. And by default, I want to show that. Well, one of the things that I can do now is I can come in here, and anytime that changes, I can run a script that says allow context menu equals, and in this case, it's going to be the same value as the check mark. So probably should have named it a little bit better, but we'll go into runtime and see how that works. So again, what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to right mouse click. You can see I get a context menu. If I remove the check mark, right mouse click, context menu is gone. All right, that's pretty good for a primer. Hopefully that'll get you started and going in the direction you want to go. Now, if you need additional help, don't forget, search through the library or just read through it to understand how you interact with server objects, how you interact with tag objects, how you interact with the trend control, the pins, and all the elements. If you're not able to search for and find the elements you want, contact your local tech support group, your local systems consultant, or even Wonderware corporate support. So again, hope this was helpful. Good luck to you in utilizing the Historian Client trend control within your custom application.